And especially if people are doing this and saying, let the air in, we're not doing anything wrong, then, just show the data, and I'd feel a lot better about it.
Well, Tim Quinlan, senior economist at Wells Fargo, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And Jennifer Chen, senior policy counsel at the Financial Fairness Team at Consumer Reports, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
And Penny Lee, president and CEO of the Financial Technology Association. Penny Lee, thank you for being with us.
Meghna, thank you.
I'm Meghna Chakrabarty. This is On Point.
On Point is a production of WBUR Boston and is distributed by APM, American Public Media.
Support for On Point comes from Storyworth. Each week, Storyworth emails a loved one a question about their life. After a year, they'll publish family memories into a bound book to keep forever. Learn more at Storyworth.com. And BetterHelp, committed to making mental well-being a priority and offering support in taking on everything life demands, with therapists available to communicate via video, chat, or phone at betterhelp.com/public.
Historian Ruth Ben-Ghiat has been warning about Donald Trump's authoritarian leanings, but those warnings didn't break through to the 77 million Americans who voted for him.
They liked what he had to say, and he created a need, or he picked up on a need that was already there.
So were her concerns overinflated, or are Americans willfully blind to how Trump could transform democracy? That's coming up Monday on Point.
You know a good story when you hear it. Makes you feel, laugh, think. Sometimes you get a little teary. I'm Scott Simon, host of Weekend Edition Saturday, and each week we bring you stories from around the country and around the world. Stories that help you learn, make you smile, catch you by surprise. Please join us every Saturday for the news you need and the stories you won't forget.
Saturday morning from 8 to 10 on WAER.
Thanks for listening to 88.3 WAER Syracuse Public Media, your local NPR station from the Newhouse School at Syracuse University.
SportsNite, your home for all SU sports talk.
Syracuse players, they don't find a player boxed out. They turn around and try to jump up and grab the ball. That's not rebounding. That's not boxing out. That's lazy. It is nowhere close to an overreaction to say that they can go 500 or better in ACC play.
I think there's something to be said about that specific phenomenon. 5 guys saying, there's no backup plan. It's just us.
Breaking down everything from around the hill.
When you get doubled up on your shots and even one more to put a cherry on top, there's no possible way you can win a lacrosse game.
You can tell it just dissipates out of nowhere. And it's the in-game adjustments that have hurt Syracuse.
And giving hot takes along the way.
Naheem McLeod, they want him to be Jesse Edwards, and he just isn't.
Fran Brown is a home run hire for Syracuse.
Get your voice heard by calling in at 315-443-2011 or interact with us on social media at WAER Sports Talk. It's Sports Night, and it starts right now.
Might be the holiday weekend, but that doesn't stop the WAER Sports Talk Department. Welcome into our Ostrom Avenue studios. We're here from 8 to 9 tonight. Ian Nicholas alongside Andrew Saliver, and we're going to start talking about one of the biggest home games for Syracuse football in decades against number 6 Miami. If you want to get your thoughts in, call in 315-443-2011. You could also text us 315-556-3929. Engage with us on Twitter at WAER Sports Talk. And if you want to see our ugly mugs, you could check out our YouTube live stream as well, WAER Sports Talk on YouTube. Andrew.
Ian.
How are you feeling ahead of this big football game tomorrow?
I'm quite excited about what we got on tap tomorrow here on our airwaves. Big one.
Big one. Do you think it's as big as people here in Syracuse are trying to make it out to be over the last couple days as the storylines are starting to swirl?
Well, I think the big storylines are actually around Miami.
Because it's a play-in.
Right. Basically, I don't have the ESPN playoff percentages. They don't give those to me. I'm not quite privileged enough to access those. But the playoff percentages have to be in the 90s with a win for Miami tomorrow and sub 10% with a loss. So the biggest game in Miami recent history, in the last 15 years for Miami. I don't know if you can necessarily say the biggest game for Syracuse in the last 20 years. It would be nice to win, obviously, if you're Syracuse, but it just makes you a 9-3 team as opposed to an 8-4 team, and that's a big deal, obviously, for where this program has been, and it might get you a nicer bowl game to go to, but the bigger stakes are ruining Miami's playoff chances and not actually for Syracuse.
So the stat that's been circulating about why this is the biggest home game in a long time for Syracuse is it's the first game since 1992 in the Dome where two teams who have 8 wins or more, you follow me?
I'm with you so far.
Have played in the game. And the last time that happened was 92. Syracuse was the 8th best team in the country. If you can believe it or not, maybe they get back to that sometime soon under Fran Brown. This was Miami in their heyday, won the national championship in 89, won the national championship in 91, and they were the number 1 team in the country at the time. It was also Syracuse's regular season finale. Miami won that game in 1992, 16-10, and this is the first time over 30 years later that two teams with 8 or more wins headed into the matchup are doing battle.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense. Syracuse hasn't had 8 wins that much.
No.
And so it would take Syracuse having 8 wins and playing a very big game late in the year, which doesn't seem to happen too much in the last 2 decades. So not super surprising. But I do think, it's more than just this year. This is all about this year for Miami tomorrow. This is your season. And I'm of the belief with what happened in the SEC last week that Miami can win this week and lose to SMU in the ACC title game and still get into the college football playoff. But it's all about this year for Miami. I think most of this is about the future for Syracuse, right? Ending the regular season on a high note for Fran Brown.
Sure.
Beating Miami, which would be, I think, the, feather in the cap win this year for Syracuse.
Oh, no doubt.
Get it done.
And no offense to the other ranked wins against UNLV on the road and Georgia Tech, your Yellow Jackets.
They're winning right now.
They are winning right now. Surely Andrew,
it's early.
An Atlanta native, is not watching that game with a close eye while breaking down Syracuse and Miami. If you think this is the biggest home game for Syracuse football since 1992, we want to hear what you have to say. You could call in 315-443-2011. You could text us as well, 315-556-3929. If I say that Syracuse football has nothing to lose in this game, would you agree with me? Because personally, I would say yes, because you mentioned, the only thing that you mentioned, I know we've talked a lot about how much is at stake for Miami. We know that. But for Syracuse football, does that shinier bowl game, especially with the expanded playoff and all the nicer bowl games already being playoff games now, does that bowl game really mean anything? Because, for me personally, Andrew, I don't care if the win total for Fran Brown in year 1 is 8 or 9. I know he went up on that podium after UConn and said, this was the biggest game of the year.
So you're saying
But I thought that was complete.
So you're saying
BS.
this game doesn't matter to Syracuse?
I'm saying it could be a huge win for Syracuse, but what I am saying is in the grand scheme of things, 8 wins compared to 9 wins doesn't mean much in my mind.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page. I think the game's important. I think it's more important for Miami, and for Syracuse, it's about the future years. That's where I view it is. This is about a program win, right?
But is it a program win?
A Fran Brown tenure building win, a recruiting win. If you can win this game, it's not about what it does for you in 2024.
I will say
it's not about what bowl game it's going to get you. It's not about what ranking it's going to get you. Although,
what does it take to be ranked anymore?
It will get you ranked if you win this game. So
hey,
that's
number
important.
28 in the country, if you count that this week for Syracuse football.
Right, Syracuse wins, they get ranked for the first time this season.
Correct.
So that would be nice. But in the grand scheme of things, where this will matter for Syracuse is if you can prove to recruits where you made steps from last year to this year. Right? If you have the win that knocked Miami out of the playoffs, that puts you on a much bigger stage than you have been all season.
Yeah, and thank goodness that the SEC fumbled things last week, because now this game has a lot more validity, because if Miami football, who barely, I know the final score would indicate different things, but who barely beat Wake Forest on Miami's senior day, if they came into this week on the outside looking into the playoff spot, is this game still on national television? Is it still at 3:30 in the afternoon with the whole college football world waiting?
Unless they had lost last week, they would still be on the inside looking out.
I guess. I mean, now people think 3 teams will make the playoff in the ACC, so I guess the ACC is...
It's not impossible, but we'll see.
Well, who knows? I see those projections. I see Clemson is in more than they've been out.
I'd be surprised if Clemson beat South Carolina tomorrow, but if they do, they still have a very good shot, especially if Clemson can beat South Carolina tomorrow. They'll be looking a lot at this Syracuse game, because that's what matters for Clemson and whether they get into the ACC title game or not. If Clemson beats South Carolina tomorrow and then Syracuse beats Miami, Clemson all of a sudden is probably above a 50% chance to make.
I thought you didn't have those metrics. Now you have those metrics.
These are the Andrew Selliver percentages.
Oh, those numbers are always skewed. I just want to let
towards
people...
what?
Oh, here, let me give you a factual number.
Okay.
As we get back, as we stop talking about the great state of South Carolina and the 2 good football teams that are down there, we keep breaking down Syracuse and Miami football that is tomorrow. Kyle McCord, this is, a lot of people are billing this as Kyle McCord, Cam Ward, 2 best passers in the country in terms of yards per game. McCord 1, Ward 2. McCord has a chance to break, not a record, but reach another milestone tomorrow. He's only 54 yards away from 4,000 in a single season, which is easier to do now than it was in 1992, but still impressive. Yep. And we've had callers. Again, guys, call in 315-443-2011. We have had callers on our programs this year, Andrew, say that Kyle McCord is the best quarterback that Syracuse has had all time. And after the week he had last week, not saying that was a statement win on his season, but another fantastic game against UConn. How confident are you to say that Kyle McCord is the best quarterback that Syracuse has ever had?
Yeah, I think talent-wise, I think you probably say yes. I think it becomes a little bit of an interesting conversation if you want to talk resume and accolades of what they did at the school, because Kyle McCord's been here for 1 year, and he's not going to take him to the playoff or anything like that. So I think it's tough when you think about the accolades and the resume that you've put together in a Syracuse jersey, but I am comfortable saying talent-wise, he's the best player that's played quarterback for Syracuse.
Are McCord and Ward going to be the 2 best players on the field tomorrow? Because Ward's the best player on the field. There's no doubt about that, right? There's no doubt in your mind. There's no doubt in my mind. Cam Ward, a future top 5 pick in the NFL draft, if not top 10, is the best player on the field.
Yeah, I agree.
But then after that, this is, again, the 6th best team in the country in Miami. Is Kyle McCord the 2nd best player on the field? I think that he is. But do you think he is? Because I think he's that good.
I actually don't think that Kyle McCord is the best player on Syracuse. I think Syracuse has Marlowe Wax and Justin Barron, who are both better football players at their position than Kyle McCord, but you don't get quite as much recognition playing linebacker or rover as you do playing quarterback.
Well, hey, Justin Barron is a full-time linebacker now.
Yeah, something
And if you
like
ask
that.
the opinion of Jim Moore, UConn's head coach, he thinks Justin Barron is like the second coming of
I agree.
Zach Thomas.
I agree. I think he's the best player on Syracuse this year. Kyle McCord has obviously done great things, but I think Justin Barron doesn't get quite enough recognition as he should as being probably a top 10 linebacker in the country.
You think he's having an All-American kind of season?
Yes, I think he's that good.
All right.
And I think...
I mean, I know you were at that NC State game, and maybe that's what's skewing your mind a little bit.
I think if you look next level where you can really separate by position, like I think Justin Barron projects better even to the NFL than Kyle McCord does at their position.
Well, sure. One's an immobile pocket passer who occasionally can get out of pressure, and the other is exactly what NFL teams search for.
Because I think Justin Barron is just that good at his position.
But look, we're not talking about NFL here. You think just to get it clear from you, Kyle McCord is not only not the best player on Syracuse, but he's third. Because the two players that you listed, and again, we're not trying to knock Kyle McCord down a peg here, but you put those were the names that came to your mind.
They were. Wax has been injured, so that's a tough one for me.
He's been Marlo Wax since he's come back,
Yeah,
though.
agreed. I think if he played the whole season, I would certainly say it. It's a little tough. Like, I think talent-wise, yes, but what he's done this year, you would say no because he's missed a lot of games. But I think both of those guys are that good at their position. They'll have a big-time job, though, because that Miami offensive line tomorrow, we can't really single out one player. Like, that whole unit is really good. I mean, this is a Miami offense that is first in the ACC in yards per game.
They're first in the country in points a game.
Yeah. And they have like 75 more yards a game than anybody else. And Syracuse is up there. So
that's what happens when you don't play a single ranked team.
Yeah. Across the front line for Miami, 340, 325, 295, 350, 315. They will present a big challenge. And if you think back to Syracuse's struggles against Boston College, it was mostly because they lost in the trenches defensively and couldn't stop the run.
Yep.
And yes, Cam Ward is known for his arm, but he can also run the football, and his offense is rushing at almost 200 yards per game. So I think that's one area of big concern for Syracuse.
I disagree. Well, I don't disagree with your take that Miami's offensive line is it's always good. And they're coached by a guy in Mario Cristobal who maybe he doesn't know how to kneel the ball when leading Georgia Tech with 40 seconds to go in 2023. But what he can do is recruit, and what he can do is coach up offensive linemen. He coached the best offensive line at Alabama when he was Nick Saban's number 2 in the mid-2010s, and then he coached the best offensive line in the country again when he was the head coach at Oregon, led by Penei Sewell. That guy can coach offensive linemen. My point, as we continue to break down Syracuse and Miami football, is I think the bigger issue for Syracuse is how do they protect Kyle McCord? Because
so in the trenches on the other side of the ball,
I'm more confident in Syracuse's pass rush to get home to Cam Ward than I am in Kyle McCord not to be running for his life into Syracuse to have a game plan to go blow for blow with Miami down the stretch.
I don't know if I agree with that.
Especially because they have this revolving door at left tackle now with David Woolaba and Big Spoon, right? Big Spoon has quietly been benched. Demetrius Weatherspoon as the season is going on for David Woolaba, who hasn't been much better. And like you said, in terms of pure poundage on the offensive line, this is almost an SEC team-like team in Miami on both sides of the ball in their fronts, and Syracuse just doesn't have that size up front, outside of Savion Washington.
Yeah, but remember, I agree. Like if we think back to the last loss for Syracuse against Boston College, those were actually both concerns. Yeah, like they got dominated on both sides of the ball.
Donovan Ezeraku was felt in that game.
Yeah, so that is interesting. But Miami's top 5 in the ACC in sacks, so they will do stuff up front. I just think that Syracuse has enough weapons to get the ball out of Kyle McCord's hands quickly enough to where they can still move the offense, even if their offensive line isn't great.
I guess. I mean, you have to hope that the run game kicks up a little bit, because if you're just going to throw your little RPO passes every time with McCord and the run game is no threat like it wasn't against UConn last week, I don't know if they are going to continue to be able to dink and dunk.
I think the offense will be okay. I think that, Miami gives up its fair share of points against good teams, against good offenses.
Hey, that Wake Forest offense
you
was
just got
on a
to figure
roll
out a way to
headed into
stop
last
them.
week.
And we'll see. You might need a turnover or two if you want to win tomorrow.
I don't know. Syracuse needs multiple takeaways to win the game tomorrow.
Yeah.
Well, Cam Ward will almost provide that. That's another thing, is Cam Ward is such a risk taker in my mind that even if you don't get pressure on him consistently, he will sit back in the pocket and he will still squirm and he will still feel like he has to put on the Superman cape. And even last week, Andrew, he threw a pick against Wake, and it was on one of those little flips because he probably watched Patrick Mahomes do it on IG Reels, on Instagram Reels, and he thought, oh, I can do this too, and it got picked off. Yeah. So he's good for one of those near opportunities almost every single game.
Yeah, and we'll see if Syracuse can capitalize, right? These big games typically come down to a couple of players making big plays, capitalizing in those big moments, and we'll see if Syracuse can do that, right? Can you get the one big takeaway that leads to points? Can you get the one big stop on fourth down? Those are the plays that typically matter most. And the biggest thing for me, Miami doesn't always start off strong. Can Syracuse play a full 60-minute game? Because you think back to Boston College, I keep bringing up that last loss because that's,
You were there, I was there, we saw it.
Most recent memory I have of Syracuse getting beat. And why they got beat. They did not play well in the fourth quarter. And Miami has stolen some wins this
Miami
season.
is a fourth quarter team. Mario Cristobal might not like it, but that's a fourth quarter team.
They have stolen some wins this season. If you think back to the Cal game, dead to rights in Berkeley.
Yep.
Came back from double digits down. Yep, exactly. This is a Miami team that you can have a lead going into the fourth quarter. That lead is not safe because the offense for Miami can wear you down and can put up points in a hurry.
I'll give you a hypothetical.
Sure.
Because we're actually broadcasting the game tomorrow for WAER, so we're not going to come out with these fiery hot Syracuse is going to win the game, Miami's going to win the game.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to give you this hypothetical.
Okay.
If Syracuse has a touchdown lead going into the fourth quarter, does Syracuse win the game? Because if Miami is the best fourth quarter team in the country,
I don't know. I can't answer that. There's a lot of things there's a lot of things at play, but would that feel safe? Absolutely not.
For me, it's a Fran Brown.
A 2-touchdown lead wouldn't feel safe going into the fourth quarter. You need to be up 21 points
Look,
to feel safe.
Look, you've seen Fran Brown and this coaching staff for a whole season. I think you can make an assumption on how they manage the clock, how they can flip as the game is going on. You mentioned the Boston College loss. They also lost Stanford in a close one too. I just want to know your confidence in that team. If they are on a similar spot to teams like Duke and teams like Cal, do you feel more confident in Syracuse in that situation? That's what I'm saying.
Yes, I think they're a better team than those teams. I would give them I think if Syracuse was up a touchdown, you would say they have above a 50% chance of winning, but not much.
We've been big on the numbers.
I'll give them in the Andrew percent chance to win indicator, 55% chance to win if they're up a touchdown.
That is so confident.
Not really.
No, it's sarcasm, Andrew.
Yeah,
I didn't know you couldn't pick up on that.
I just think after everything Miami has shown to win games late, even if you are a touchdown better in the first 45 minutes, I don't think that means you're going to win the football game if you're Syracuse. So that's why I think the fourth quarter you got to play a full 60 minutes tomorrow.
Play a full 60 minutes for arguably one of the first or second times of the year. UConn maybe, Cal maybe.
No, definitely not UConn.
Cal's the only game where Syracuse has played a full 60.
And even
then their defense kind of let go at the end.
Yeah.
But everybody, the big takeaway from that game was most complete effort of year. So if that's what your most complete effort of the season looks like, beating Cal by 7, albeit on the road, then that's not going to be Syracuse's
I will
best
say,
tomorrow.
though,
That's not going to be enough to beat them.
We talk about winning games down the stretch. Syracuse has done it, right? They've been good at that.
Sure.
They came back against Virginia Tech, won that game in overtime. They pulled one out late after trailing at UNLV in overtime.
That game should have been a loss.
And
that there is no doubt.
Right. I think they've actually been. What are they in one-score games? They've had some games that shouldn't be one-score games like UConn and Cal that were, but they've got an incredible record in one-score games.
I'll say one thing. I know we talked about Kyle McCord earlier. By the way, my official stance on that, he's not the best quarterback in program history.
He is not?
He's not.
Okay.
No, you kind of said yes.
I said talent-wise, yes. What he's done at Syracuse, no.
No. I think you cannot look at Donovan McNabb and Ryan Nassib's careers at Syracuse.
Right, careers, but is Kyle McCord more talented?
Nassib was a first-team All-American, so Kyle McCord is not going to be a first-team All-American.
Agreed, but is he more talented?
No.
Okay.
I think passing numbers are inflated more now than ever these days. Anyways, the reason I brought up Kyle one more time was because he's been here before. I understand that, every game, it's a faceless opponent every week, but that is not going to be the case this week. No Syracuse players going into this game thinking that. They're all thinking they want to beat Miami in their final game in the Dome. McCord 2-1 last year against top 10 teams when he was at Ohio State. And that one loss is the loss that ultimately ran him out of town against Michigan, but a game that they could have won at the end. And none of these other Syracuse guys, for the most part, have been in this kind of game before. Yeah. So I think that is almost unquantifiably important for Syracuse. If they do, as I brought up, maybe it's a stupid hypothetical, but my hypothetical is I do feel really confident in Syracuse to hold on to a late lead compared to other teams because those other teams that we mentioned don't have Kyle McCord.
I will say, too, just a quick note, kind of sidetracking here before we finish up this conversation on the game tomorrow.
Yep.
I was unsure what I felt about the 12-team playoff going into the decision to move to 12 teams. I still haven't gotten to see the 12-team playoff in action, so the actual playoff experience, I'll leave my verdict still out on that. But I'm totally in on the fact that we're in the last week of the regular season, and in years past in the 4-team playoff, you'd have 1 or 2 games that would still decide the playoff teams. I mean, there are 10 games that are still important this weekend. Syracuse, Miami being one of them. I mean, Tulane's game last night was important, right?
Yeah.
Syracuse
Memphis.
is important. The Clemson game is important. Yeah, big win for Memphis. That gave a couple other group of 5 teams some hope outside of Boise if Boise were to lose. I mean, in the Big 12, there are 4 teams still playing to get into the conference tournament or the conference championship.
Well, we've known since the middle of the season.
And they don't
Big
even.
12
It's still even up in the air whether the winner of that will get in, right?
Yes.
I mean, it is an awesome weekend where 10 or 12 of these games are all going to impact what goes on and who makes the 12-team playoff. And it's made the Syracuse-Miami game tomorrow important. It's made a whole lot of other games more important. And as a football fan, I think that's awesome.
Yet College Game Day decided to go to a game where there are no playoff implications on the line.
What are you talking about?
Texas A&M's not making the playoffs.
Yes, Ian. Texas
South
A&M.
Carolina all the way.
Ian, Texas A&M quite literally makes the SEC championship with a win, and if you win the SEC championship, you're in. It's the only game where 2 teams are playing to get into their conference championship. Good decision, College Game Day. I'm all for it.
Look, I was on the Mike Outgo train and then he lost. So, you know
Still
what?
A good coach.
Fraudulent Aggies team.
One of many games that has a lot of
I'm just
importance.
standing up for the real Syracuse fans here, Andrew.
Okay.
College Game Day is yet to come to Syracuse. Should have happened this week. Anyways, we'll stop talking about College Game Day, but we'll keep talking about Syracuse on the other side. Men's hoops, a win, but it didn't feel like it. How many times have we said that this season? They eke by Cornell, men's hoops, in the middle of the week, and we'll tell you what we thought of that one on the other side of Sports Night.
Your source for arts and entertainment information, WAER Syracuse Public Media is supported by Syracuse Stage, presenting Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella, co-produced with the Syracuse University Department of Drama. This contemporary take on the classic fairy tale invites audiences to step into a storybook world brought to life with lavish costumes, charming characters, and beloved music. November 22nd to January 5th. Tickets and information at syracusestage.org.
There is a one-stop listen for everything Syracuse athletics.
You got great talent on this offense. Like, you can't go dormant for an entire quarter. And
the Ostrom Avenue podcast provides unique opinions, plus exciting interviews from industry experts.
Joined by Georgia Tech play-by-play broadcaster Andy Demetra, Syracuse.com, football beat reporter Emily Laker.
Check out weekly interviews on YouTube and listen at waer.org or wherever you get your podcast.
35 years ago, Queen Latifah took over the hip-hop throne with the release of her debut album, All Hail the Queen. Correspondent John Morrison joins to talk about how that album challenged the historically male-dominated hip-hop space and about Queen Latifah's legacy on a new edition of the Culture Corner next time on World Cafe.
Saturday afternoon at 1 on WAER and streaming live on WAER.org.
On this week's Wait, the world's most accomplished blind mountain climber, Eric Weimeyer, talks about the challenges of conquering Everest.
Khumbu Icefall is right out of base camp on Everest, and it's a blind person's worst nightmare. It doesn't meet Americans with Disability Act standards. I mean...
I'm Peter Sagal. Join us for an easy downhill to end your week with climbers, weightlifters, and the best thing that ever happened to gum wrappers. That's Wait, Don't Tell Me from NPR.
Saturday morning at 11 on 88.3 FM WAER.
This is Sports Night on Black Friday here in 2024. Andrew Sullivan, Ian Nicholas. We've talked plenty about tomorrow's big matchups, Syracuse and Miami inside the Dome. We got to get to some Syracuse men's basketball here on Sports Night. Glad to have you with us. Happy Thanksgiving to those of you out there tuning in wherever
Still
you might
eating the
be.
leftovers.
Yeah, I hope you are. I hope that's a good Sports Night snack for you. You make your leftover Thanksgiving sandwich today, Ian?
Well, unfortunately, Andrew, as you, I don't live in Syracuse, so I couldn't. I took the train up and down this go around. Can't really transport turkey, gravy.
Fair.
If there's any
Fair on the gravy part.
Honestly, dessert was the big winner.
Pumpkin pie?
No, I'm a big banana cream pie guy.
Oh,
so
wow.
you know
that is adventurous for Thanksgiving.
That's not true. You know, I was.
It is adventurous. I didn't say it was bad. I said it was
because
adventurous.
I have support from. This is such a random shout. There's nothing to do with Syracuse.
Okay.
But was watching the Thanksgiving football game last night, the third one. It was Dolphins, Packers, and there was a sideline hit on favorite Thanksgiving foods.
Mm-hmm.
Calais Campbell, the legendary, Cardinal, now he's a Dolphin, said his favorite Thanksgiving food, his mom's banana cream pie.
And that's yours too?
And it's mine too.
Wow. You and
Calais has
Campbell.
a foot on me.
Dolphins can't play in the cold.
No, he can't. Fins down.
You're going to love this. I got to get to the phone lines, but before that, today through TSA on my flight back to Syracuse, I did take 2 leftover sandwiches with turkey, dressing, or stuffing, depending on who you are.
Oh, we could have a whole conversation on that.
Corn pudding and cranberry sauce.
What's corn pudding?
Corn pudding is...
Is it rice pudding?
No. It would be called rice pudding if it was rice pudding.
Wait, is it adjacent? Is it rice pudding adjacent?
No, it's like it's kind of like cornbread, except in more of a sweet, creamy form.
Okay.
It's like cornbread casserole almost.
I
Think
got
of it
you.
like that.
I'm picking up.
It's a very southern concept.
Yeah, I don't do that.
So good leftover sandwiches for lunch. Anyways,
good for you. Good for TSA.
Yes, exactly. They did not flag it. Bag did not get stopped. Clean through here to Syracuse, and now on Sports Night. Speaking of, you can call us 315-443-2011 with maybe you have thoughts on what leftovers you're eating right now, or on Syracuse men's basketball, which we're getting to as well. One of the two, you can choose. We'd be happy to take the call either way. Syracuse men's basketball takes down Cornell, 82-72. Sneaky free throw at the end makes it a first double-digit win of the year for Syracuse. Didn't really feel like that, though, Ian. A game that the freshmen, though, basically won for Syracuse. Elijah Moore, Donnie Freeman really got it done.
Yeah, I think if you compare this mid-major close-ish win to all the other ones at the start of the year. Youngstown State in double overtime, Lemoyne and Colgate down to the final few possessions.
Yeah.
I think at least in this game, you walk away with something that happened on the court that you can actually implement into future games, which is Elijah Moore should be starting and Donnie Freeman should not be the 4th or 5th option on the court. He felt like, and you and I were down in Brooklyn covering both the Texas and the Texas Tech games. There were times in the game where Donnie Freeman was just simply not on the court. Large stretches of the game where he was not on the court.
Texas, he barely played in the second half.
Yeah, and the reasoning after the game from, I think from Red Autry, I don't really know what it was outside of the fact that
he wasn't doing anything other than gathering loose rebounds.
Sure, but even then, he's making an impact on the game. Even then, he's the best rebounder on the floor for Syracuse. If you take him off, he's got the best vert on the team. But more importantly, if the backcourt is not J.J. Starling or Chapa Moore by the time you go down to Knoxville and play Tennessee on Tuesday, then you're toast.
Thoughts on Lucas Taylor?
What? I mean, you could start all three of them. Lucas Taylor.
And not start Bell. I think it's a possibility.
5 points for Chris.
I think it's a real possibility, to be honest.
The Chris Bell conundrum. I think he's a super talented.
It's been a 3-year conundrum here in Syracuse.
I will say this. I think Chris Bell, from how we've dealt with him, is a great guy. He has been a great guy to the media. He gives thoughtful answers. He's honest, even when he performs, when he doesn't perform. And there are times where he plays very well. But it feels like there's a problem with him on any given night, whether it's him with the officials, him with Red Autry, his leash. Boeheim had his tight leashes on guys, and he had a tight leash on Bell, and Autry has a tight leash on Bell. So it just feels like it's very difficult to keep him in the game for as long as he's been, given that there's always some kind of problem. So, yeah, I don't mind putting Chapa Moore in there as a starter and seeing what happens.
You don't want to, it's hard to say this because there isn't, no coach will tell you this, although Jim Boeheim kind of did.
Yeah, because he just didn't care at the end.
Yeah, but Chris Bell does feel like a tough player to coach.
Totally.
Which is why it's actually a little surprising that he is the way he is with the media.
Yes.
Because you would almost expect him to be the exact opposite. But after games, he is very reflective.
Yep.
He gives thoughtful answers. He is brutally honest. And it's a little surprising because of what you see on camera in his interactions with himself, talking to himself, screaming at opposing head coaches, screaming at his own coaches. And now it leads you to the point where after this game against Cornell, Red Autry spoke in the press conference. He said we might be starting to narrow down who's playing.
Thank goodness.
And start playing 7 or 8 guys. And you might see changes to the starting lineup. This was the first game, although it was a little bit injury-related. That the
Eddie was a little slow. Lampkin was a little slow.
That the starting lineup changed, but it was the first game that the lineup changed. And it feels like if you're going to have any chance at Tennessee this week, that you better bring your best 5 to start the game because, boy, Syracuse can't figure out how to start a game on the right foot.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I only singled in on the Tennessee game because it's the most difficult challenge on Syracuse's slate the rest of the year. Maybe sans Duke.
By far.
I mean, maybe Duke can get there. Right. When they have to play them. But, I mean, Tennessee has lived up to its expectations so far this year.
The Vols look really good.
Yeah, I mean, they still have Zakai Ziegler somehow. I feel like he's been in college for 50 years.
No Dalton Connect, but...
Yeah, but they can still score.
Yeah.
And Ziegler's so good defensively that he's like 3 guys on defense. So he just makes things so much easier for them. But, I mean, your best... I know... we're also talking about a Syracuse basketball team coached by a guy in Red Autry who I still think is a great coach and obviously a great recruiter, but who started Justin Taylor till the very end last year. So I don't know how much he really cares about who starts the game, but the best lineup that Syracuse has, I think, you already mentioned 2 of the guys, but it's Starling, Moore, Taylor, Lampkin, Freeman. And your 6th man who plays almost as much as the starters is Davis.
Jair Davis.
Because you have a defensive stopper in Taylor who I'll be perfectly honest with you. I had no idea that this guy was that good a defender coming in here. I saw he averaged 14.5 points a game at Georgia State. I thought they brought him in for his scoring. They probably did. He just can't score. That's fine. You have your stopper. You have your shooter. You have your ball handler. You have your bouncy big man. And you have, really, he's not your point guard, but he's your point forward in Lampkin. That's your best lineup.
Yeah. It's interesting. I know after the game on the double overtime, we had Tyler Aiken picking out his best starting lineup.
What did he say?
Along with Austin Barrick.
What did those guys? Did they disagree? I think they're probably bigger Jair Davis guys.
I believe Jair Davis was not in one of their starting lineups, but I'm not positive. I don't quite
Anyways,
remember.
this is a conversation that we'll continue to have, especially after what, as you said, after what Red Autry said. You have to start to wonder, who is he talking about? I mean, clearly he was talking about, no offense to him, Juan Carlos. That guy has been given ample opportunities, and I feel like he almost has to be out of the rotation sooner rather than later, given how he has performed with Syracuse.
Yeah, he hasn't been great. He's been actually probably worse than great.
Yeah, like, at this point, they're making up excuses for him, saying, oh, well, he looks a lot worse because he's passing the ball, but the guys who he's passing the ball to aren't making their shots. I mean, Red Autry literally said that after the game.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm sorry. When Eddie Lampkin passes the ball, I tend to notice because he's a really good passer. With Juan Carlos, I haven't seen it.
Boy, that lob pass to 40 feet away from the bucket, really good out of Juan Carlos. If you've got thoughts on the starting lineup, who it should be when Syracuse goes to Knoxville on Tuesday, you can call us. 315-443-2011. One more time for you. 315-443-2011 on the phone lines. Open till 9 p.m. tonight when we finish up here on SportsNite. You can text us 315-556-3929, the number to do so as well. Lucas Taylor is an interesting case because he's the kind of guy that you would play, offense for defense substitutions with late. Because he doesn't give you a ton in the scoring department, but boy, is he probably the best defender in my eyes on the whole team.
Yeah, no, and that's why, I mean, what's the biggest problem been with this? That's another reason why they have to play him, and they have to play him a lot, in my opinion, is they are still having massive defensive issues. And, Red Autry continues to think obviously he's not going to say his scheme is broken. But he's continued to say, I don't really know, to be honest.
You get fired the day you say your scheme is broken.
Yeah, I actually can't coach defense. Sorry. Let's get Jim back in here. Let's start running the 2-3 again.
Well, Jim actually lasted longer past his scheme being broken. But
yeah, well, that's a story.
When you have 40 good years.
If you really want callers, let's just start talking about that more. No, I mean, again, I mentioned it earlier. It's weird that Lucas Taylor's role is nothing that we expected it to be. But this team has plenty. I think even if Lucas Taylor is a net zero for you offensively, I'll say this. I'm going to go out on a limb here. The Oklahoma City Thunder back in the day.
Oh, my gosh.
Had Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook.
Yes.
Two of the best players in the sport.
Syracuse
Kevin Durant
ain't got either of them.
No, they don't. But you know who they could play because they had those two guys on the floor? You probably don't even know who this is. Andre Roberson.
Oh.
Andre Roberson was one of the best defensive players in basketball, but he averaged 2 points a game, shooting 30% from the floor.
And a lot of
they started him because they could.
A lot of teams have that, actually. And usually it would be a Juan Carlos type.
That's what everyone thought it would be.
Playing great defense and assisting on the offensive side of the ball.
But he hasn't done either.
Yeah, he hasn't done either. Lucas Taylor's a better defender. I don't know that Lucas Taylor's going to orchestrate the offense is the problem.
He doesn't need to.
Well,
he doesn't. They don't. They have two ball handlers,
who?
Potentially three on the floor. I already said it. They have Starling and Moore.
Who's going to run the point? Who's going to run the offense? Starling?
It doesn't necessarily, with Eddie Lampkin on the floor, they don't need a guy who's going to hold the ball for 10-plus seconds in every possession. They don't need, this isn't, again, I know I'm getting deep into my NBA references here. This one's a little more applicable. Jamal Murray is the perfect point guard for the Denver Nuggets because they run everything through Nikola Jokic.
Yeah. Also, let's get off.
You know
the
what
NBA.
I mean? Come on.
But here's my concern with this: if Lucas Taylor's on the floor at the same time as J.J. Starling and Elijah Moore, that means you don't have Chris Bell on the floor.
Yes.
And you are probably going to have J.J. Starling as the main ball handler.
Which he has been for a decent chunk of this year.
Yes, agreed. Do you have enough point scoring?
Yes. If you get 70% of the version that you got of Donnie Freeman every night against Cornell, which, by the way, this is where this conversation started, because you mentioned that the freshman played really well in this game.
Yeah, he was good.
He was good. Choppa Moore made all 5 of their threes in the game, which was good. Because why am I taking Chris Bell off the floor and replacing him with Lucas Taylor? Chris Bell, I appreciate that he's gotten better at rebounding and better on defense, but I'd rather have the Chris Bell of last year on the floor than the Chris Bell that Syracuse has gotten this year, which is a Chris Bell that can't shoot but can play maybe average defense and maybe be an average rebounder at the 3.
Yeah, he's shooting at 28% from 3.
I mean, again, at one point...
That's a drastic difference.
So
it was 42% last year.
He was one of the best in the country.
Yeah.
He was the best in the ACC.
Second.
To who?
Pitt.
Okay.
Hinton or whatever at Pitt.
Oh, okay. Blake Hinson?
Yeah, Blake Hinson.
Oh, that guy was a beast.
Exactly.
Jeff Capel's team, good, by the way. Very good. Pitt, very good. I think you have enough scoring. You have Freeman. If Freeman gives you, 12 to 14 a game the rest of the way, Lampkin can buy himself a bucket down low. Starling has been good enough. He was not good against Cornell, but I'm not out on JJ after a bad game against Cornell. And I think Choppa Moore can continue to ascend if you actually play him, which they haven't really consistently
And
this
Lampkin
year.
can't play all 40, so if Lampkin comes out, you go Majstorovic and Donnie
Davis.
Freeman. Or Jair Davis. Yeah, that's fair. Davis can really score. The one thing if Lucas Taylor is out there that can't happen in my eyes is you can't have Lucas Taylor and Jaquan Carlos on the floor at the same time.
No, that's unwatchable. Unless you need a defensive stop at the end of a game and there's 5 seconds on the clock, baby. You can't have both those. Again, excuse me. This is based off what we have seen, right? Because our expectations headed into the year were Jaquan Carlos was not going to be a scorer, but he could score, and Lucas Taylor was a scorer. But from what we have seen, what Syracuse basketball has seen this year, Lucas Taylor is not a reliable scorer, neither is Jaquan Carlos. So you have to expectate, at this point, when does we go from a trend to reality? Same thing with Chris Bell. When do you have to realize that Chris Bell can't shoot the ball from 3 this year? And it's not just a slump.
Yeah, exactly. Because you can keep putting him out there for so long, expecting him to do what he did a year ago.
The time for him to fix his game has gone away.
I actually think Red Autry is on your page here.
Yes.
Because Red Autry said in the postgame presser,
they're getting out.
Yeah, he basically said, all right, we've hit the point where we have to play the way that I think is best for the team now.
Yep.
Because
Syracuse is going to beat these teams regardless. Time to play the guys who have actually played well.
Yeah. All right. Syracuse is going to Knoxville, where if we don't play our best, we might lose by 40. So
I'm not going to lose by 40.
I'm going to not lose by 40 and put who I actually think should be out there. It'll be interesting. We'll see if the starting lineup actually changes. Because you mentioned last year so much talk about it, and it didn't
Never
really.
did.
So we'll see on Tuesday if it actually changes. Any predictions for when the Orange go to Knoxville from you, Ian?
All I'll say is this. Must listen radio after the game, as I will join Sam Reese on the double overtime.
That's all you're going to say about this game?
I think Tennessee wins by 12 to 15. And if Syracuse...
Depending on the way the game goes, you could consider that a win for Syracuse.
I don't. I'm not in the moral victory business. Syracuse only wins the game if they get out to an absurd lead at half. Tennessee can't find the back of the basket to save its life. but they're playing at home, so I find that very hard to believe.
If the Andrew Maths are mathing, I believe Tennessee will be number 3 in the country on Tuesday.
Okay.
Which
Mr. AP poll.
Yeah, if I'm predicting the AP poll, which is sometimes tough to do, they don't exactly do what is right always. But I believe Tennessee will be number 3 behind Kansas and somebody else.
You were getting who the second best team in the country is?
Well, it's all changed. Oh, Auburn. Auburn and Kansas will be ahead of Tennessee.
Yes.
I mean, I think because Duke plays here, I think you can make a legitimate point that this is going to be the toughest game of the year for Red Autry and company.
And there's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
It's not must win, but it'd be nice if they could keep it close.
Yeah, you would like to not get just completely blown out of the gym in the first half.
Yep.
All right, we're going to hit our second and final break here on SportsNite. You can keep calling us 315-443-2011. When we return, we'll flip sides to the women's side, talk about Felicia Leggett, Jack and company. They come off a 1-1 trip to Destin, 2 polar opposite results, a blowout win and a blowout loss. And we'll talk about that and what's ahead against Yale on Sunday for the Cuse women's basketball team next on SportsNite.
We know you've got a lot to do in a day, and sometimes it may not be easy to tune in at exactly the right time to catch WAER News. But WAER News is always available, wherever and whenever you are, without a paywall. Visit our website to use our live stream or catch up on local and national news, as well as podcasts on our website at WAER.org.
You know a good story when you hear it. Makes you feel, laugh, think. Sometimes you get a little teary. I'm Scott Simon, host of Weekend Edition Saturday, and each week we bring you stories from around the country and around the world. Stories that help you learn, make you smile, catch you by surprise. Please join us every Saturday for the news you need and the stories you won't forget.
Saturday morning from 8 to 10 on WAER.
On this week's Wait, the world's most accomplished blind mountain climber, Eric Weimeyer, talks about the challenges of conquering Everest.
Khumbu Ice falls right out of base camp on Everest, and it's a blind person's worst nightmare. It doesn't meet Americans with Disability Act standards. I mean...
I'm Peter Sagal. Join us for an easy downhill to end your week with climbers, weightlifters, and the best thing that ever happened to gum wrappers. That's Wait, Don't Tell Me from NPR.
Saturday morning at 11 on 88.3 FM WAER.
Tom Hanks is mad.
You moron! Thank you for the use of the turn signal.
I'm Jesse Thorne. This week on Bullseye, the man himself, Tom Hanks, talks about advanced driving tactics as well as the power of therapy and what it's like to play someone who isn't nice. That's on the next Bullseye from MaximumFun.org and NPR.
Sunday morning at 11 on WAER.
On the next Radiolab.
Oh, Pompeii.
We travel back to the ancient Roman Empire.
This does not look good.
I mean, it's the apocalypse.
To solve a 2,000-year-old mystery.
The coldest of cold cases.
And learn that...
How did we all buy into this idea?
Everything we think we know that happened at Pompeii...
I don't know.
...is wrong.
Oh, it popped!
That's on the next Radiolab.
Saturday at 7 a.m. on 88.3 FM WAER.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Sports Night, where we have already covered Syracuse football, Syracuse men's hoops. Now it's time to talk about a team that's getting plenty of pub over the last couple weeks on the Hill, Syracuse women's basketball. If you want to call in Ian Nicholas and Andrew Selliver on the other side, you can. 315-443-2011. And you could text us as 315-556-3929. On Twitter, it's at WAER Sports Talk, and on YouTube, it's also at WAER Sports Talk for our live stream. Syracuse women's basketball, Andrew, the reason I said what I said is because Felicia Leggett Jack, she's a woman of many words, but the words that she chose to use after the Albany loss last week were a little harsh.
She didn't mince words that time.
She took a straight beeline right to the fans. who she is from Syracuse, and she did play for Syracuse, so there's nobody that knows his program better than her. And she said it was embarrassing that her team only had 30 fans in the stands, her words, against UAlbany. UAlbany ends up beating Syracuse for the first time ever, and they lose by 3. And now Orange fans have a chance to come and support the team after they go to Florida in a couple neutral site games earlier this week, and they beat Missouri, and they lost to Creighton, and just kind of want to get your opinions on not only Felicia Leggett-Jack's words, but then how her team kind of responded going down to Florida and splitting those 2 games.
It is interesting because I do see the benefits of certain coaches saying certain things in press conferences, almost directing it at their team, right? Like
but that was not at her team.
Correct. That was the bizarre part. A lot of times coaches earlier in the season will say things in press conferences that they know will get back to their team almost to send a message.
Yes.
But that was quite literally not directed at her team, which I thought was interesting. I think there were better ways to do that. Like, I don't know why that was the time.
Well, I'll tell you. Can I tell you part of the reason just from being there?
Sure, you were there. Go ahead.
Usually when you cover these kinds of events, it takes maybe 15, 20 minutes to get the coach and the players after the game in that press conference room.
10 to 15 minutes, I would say.
For some reason, after this game, Felicia Leggett-Jack and her 2 players, Georgia Woolley and Isabel Verajao, decided to come right out of the locker room and right into the press conference room 3 to 5 minutes after the game.
Okay.
Which I would say is not enough time for any coach in any sport to cool down after a result like that and deliver the message that they want to in the way that they want to in that moment.
That's fair. I just think, like, I don't necessarily disagree with her. I do think, like, I would have taken a more Fran Brown approach in which
is what?
Well, Fran Brown, remember when people asked him what he thought of people showing up and why it wasn't sellouts and why the attendance was okay but not perfect. He said, basically, you got to build it for them to come, right? He said, we have to earn the attendance. We have to earn being the number 1 show in town. We have to earn people's eyeballs and people's attendance.
Which for a football coach, is pretty humbling to say. I'll give him that.
Agreed. I mean, to be fair to Coach Felicia Leggett-Jack, they started to earn attendance last year.
Totally.
And they
Best show in town in the winter.
Right, I agree. I mean, far more entertaining games than the men's team last year.
Yeah.
And they started to get attendance. Now, was it enough to get attendance the next year at UAlbany? No.
On a Wednesday night.
Right. But to be fair to her, a lot of the top 25 women's basketball programs in the country would do much better than that in attendance. I don't think it's unfair for her to call out the attendance. I think she could have picked a better time, like not after her team lost to UAlbany, and she is fuming, right?
Yes.
If you did it after a win and calmly said, we need to have better attendance at games, I think it would probably be better received. Now, the athletic department is doing its best. People can get 2 free tickets to the Yale game on Sunday.
John Lally, who is the biggest booster publicly of Syracuse athletics, the Lally Athletic Complex, anybody, bought 200 tickets to the game and is giving them out to kids, I believe.
Yes.
To local students.
Underprivileged, I believe, local basketball players.
Which is
and
awesome.
Students.
That's
Agreed.
awesome. But again, that hasn't happened every game. It's happening now because Felicia Leggett-Jack said, what the heck?
Right. Which is
the
why
community
I
said,
say,
okay.
Which is why I say I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that she did it. I just probably wouldn't have done it in the same manner that she did. Her team did kind of respond and then didn't respond this week. They went to Destin. They blew out Missouri 82-59, and then they got absolutely shellacked by Creighton 86-59.
Solid Creighton team.
Agreed. I don't know about you, Ian. On those 2 games, I tend to try and not overreact either because I think Missouri is not that good, and so it's not super surprising that the Orange blew Missouri out, although a step in the right direction. And I think Creighton is very good, and should you have gotten blown out? Maybe not, but should you have won that game? Maybe not.
Yeah, so I'm going to completely, unfortunately, invalidate the Missouri win. Missouri was projected to finish 15th.
Right, it's not a
in the
good
SEC.
Missouri team, so you should have won.
Yeah.
And they did it in a manner that was convincing, which is a good thing.
Like, Missouri is a worse team than St. Joe's.
Oh, totally.
St.
Joe's should be in the tournament.
Right. So, anyways, Creighton, yeah, I think Creighton is one of the best teams in the Big East, which I don't think means a whole lot because the Big East, in my opinion, not a power
Creighton's
conference in women's basketball.
A very good team. Top 25 team this year.
Well, they weren't at the time that they played.
They will be.
But sure. They also shot 12 of 15 from 3 at the start of the game, which
absurd.
Isn't going to happen every time, albeit it's now 2 teams that have caught fire against Syracuse, being St. Joe's and Creighton from 3. I do think that Creighton loss was telling. Because I don't even think Syracuse walked into the game with the wrong mindset. Right? Because after the game, Georgia Woolley got the hard hat, which if you don't know what the hard hat is, you can look up, Syracuse women's basketball team on Twitter. They give out a little prop after every game to be MVP of the game for Syracuse. And I thought, Georgia Woolley said, this is Syracuse women's basketball after the Missouri game. And then the night later, they lose by 20. I don't think it was for a lack of effort. I just think it's clearly for a lack of talent. So if you put Creighton in the ACC, I think that's a middle-of-the-pack team.
I think it's better than that.
Okay. I think they're not finishing in the top 5 in the ACC.
Right.
But my point is, if Syracuse can't compete against Creighton, and when I mean can't compete, I mean they couldn't compete, then how do you expect them to win not only against the best teams in the ACC, but against the middle-of-the-pack teams, which they were supposed to be?
Yeah, we'll see. It's a big week. You go Yale at home, you go to Texas A&M, who made the tournament last year, then you host what was a top 5 Notre Dame team, lost today. So if Syracuse can go 2-1 in this week's stretch of 3 games, I think that would be a win.
What? That wouldn't be a win. I would be parading down Marshall Street if they were 2-1.
What? I mean, they should beat Yale.
I mean, yes.
And if you can get a win in one of the other 2,
no offense.
You're going to parade for winning one of those.
Can you please clarify who Notre Dame lost to today?
TCU.
That's a good TCU team this year.
But
if Syracuse
Texas A&M's a winnable game.
I'm sorry, but if Syracuse
they beat Notre Dame twice last year, you're going to parade Marshall Street for beating them?
With the way Syracuse women's basketball is playing right now, with the way they're playing right now, and it's a shame we don't have more show, Andrew, because we could talk about this for hours. They're not going to go within 10 points of A&M or Notre Dame. With the way they're playing right now.
Parading Marshall Street is crazy. Unfortunately, we don't have any time to
expand
on that.
No, we don't. And you know what? I want Felicia Leggett-Jack to make me eat my words. I want her team to make her eat my words. I think they're a great group. I don't think they're there yet.
All right, we'll post a video if they go 2-1 this week. Ian parades Marshall Street.
Andrew Selver and Ian Nicholas, we've had you for the last hour. Thanks for joining our parade here on Sports Night. For our producer, Jordan Leonard, our engineer, Tyler Aiken, our AER Sports Desk, Jake Klein and Dan Papillo, signing off for now. 3:30 football game tomorrow. Tune into our coverage at 3 o'clock and our post-game coverage, Syracuse and Miami. Tune into the double overtime as well. We'll see you in less than 24 hours for a pretty big game.